So the topic we're going to cover today is mixed number operations. So we're working here with fractions. We're going to be subtracting with unlike denominators, but the craziest part is that we're going to be borrowing. So regular adding and subtracting fractions, you just have to have a common denominator. It's a little bit different when you borrow, so that's kind of why this video is by itself. So we're going to be doing some fractions operations, but with borrowing. So the same thing we talk about when we add or subtract just normal mixed numbers, 3 1/3 minus 1 4/5. So just like normal, we do actually have to have a common denominator. So we're going to go ahead and set up those common denominators here. And we have 3 and 5. So 3 and 5, the least common multiple is going to be 15. So we're going to use 15 here. And then we'll kind of go from there. So we ask ourselves, how did I get from 3 to 15? Well, I multiplied 3 times 5 to get to 15. And whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So 1 times 5 is 5, okay? Same thing down here. We ask ourselves, how do we get from 5 to 15? Well, from 5 to 15, we multiplied times 3. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So 4 times 3 is going to be 12, okay? We're going to go ahead and mark out everything in the middle here. We don't want to get overwhelmed. Once we have that common denominator, we can get rid of those other fractions. They're not really something that we need right this second. So as we are subtracting, okay, so technically we're taking 5 and we need to take away 12. So that is a problem because if we have 5 pieces of pizza, we can't take away 12 pieces of pizza. So just like in a normal subtraction problem, you go over and you borrow from the thing next to you. So we're going to borrow from the 3, and technically I'm borrowing 1 whole, so this 3 becomes a 2, okay? So the 1 whole that we're borrowing needs to look like a fraction. So this 1 whole, technically, our pizza is already cut into pieces that are 15ths. So if I have a whole pizza that has 15ths, that means the 1 whole that I'm borrowing, this is 1 whole pizza, but it's cut into 15ths, so 15 15ths. The main thing that we need to realize is we're not going to just bring over and put a 1 right here in front of the 5. We're not borrowing 10 like in a normal subtraction problem. We're borrowing a whole pizza, and the whole pizza is 15 pieces, and that's why that is super important. There is a shortcut I'm going to show you here in a minute, but for now I want you to understand why we're doing what we're doing. So we had 5 pieces. We borrowed the 1 whole, which gave us 15 more. So now we have 20 pieces, okay? We had 5 already. We got 15 more when we borrowed. Now we have 20. So what we do now is I can subtract. 20 minus 12 gives me 8, and we worked really hard for that common denominator, so 15ths is still going to be our denominator, and then it's going to be 2 minus 1 is 1. So 1 and 8/15 would be our answer here. As far as the shortcut, okay, once you know this piece of information, so once you understand why we're borrowing 15 15ths, then you can kind of do a little bit of a shortcut. So what I tell my students is once you understand how many pieces are in the whole, then you can just add the numerator and the denominator together. So if I know that this pizza has 15 whole pieces and I already have 5, I add them together, and now when I borrow, I have 20, which is what we just did. The only difference is I add the numerator and the denominator together. So I add the whole pizza, I add what I already have, and now I have 20. So 20 minus 12 would give me 8. Okay, let's do another example. So this next one, 7 and 1/10 minus 4 3/4. Again, anytime I add or subtract fractions, I do have to have a common denominator. So we're going to find one. Between 10 and 4, a lot of people might use 40. That would work. But if I list the multiples of 10, the second multiple of 10 is 20. Well, I can do 4 times 5 to get to 20, so that's why we're going to use 20. So we'll make our common denominators. And you probably can already tell 1/10 seems to be a little bit of a smaller fraction. 3/4 is closer to 1 whole, so that's why we're going to have to borrow here. So to get from 10 to 20, I multiply times 2 to get from 1. So whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So I multiply times 2. That gives me 2/20. Same thing on the bottom. To get from 4 to 20, I multiplied times 5. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So 3 times 5 is 15. Again, I'm going to get rid of all this in the middle here as to not confuse us. Once we have a common denominator, we can kind of work with that specifically. So 2 minus 15 definitely gives us a problem. Again, we're going to have to go over to the 7 and we're going to borrow. We are only borrowing one whole. Okay, so one whole. Our one whole over here, we'll go ahead and write it out and then we'll do our shortcut so that you can do it both ways. So our pizza this time is cut into 20ths. Because I want it to be a common denominator, this one whole is going to be in 20ths. So 20 20ths is what I'm borrowing here. I had to already. I got 20 more. So I have 22 20ths. Now I can subtract. So 22 minus 15 gives me 7. I worked really hard for that common denominator of 20. And 6 minus 4 is 2. Again, that shortcut, if you wanted to cut out this piece here in the middle, this one whole, the shortcut would be just to add these guys together. 2 plus 20 is 22, and that's what happens when you borrow. Again, 22 minus 15 is 7. Okay? Last one, it's a little bit different. It has a whole number, and then we're taking away a fraction. So it's going to be the same concept. I think these are a little bit simpler even. So a lot of people would be really tempted to just bring this 5/7 down here into the answer. We can't actually do that because this right here means that there's nothing up here and I can't take 5/7 if I have nothing to take it from. So we're going to go over to the 4 just like we've been doing, and we're going to borrow. So we're going to borrow one whole, and this is going to become a 3. Same thing we've been doing. The only difference here is I don't have a fraction to already add on to. So instead of adding on to what I already have, I'm going to get this one whole, and the denominator that I already have is 7ths. So if I'm already using 7ths, then I want a pizza that's cut into 7ths. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. That's why that's the one whole that we're borrowing. That's why we can use 7 divided by 7, because it represents one whole. Okay? So now we can subtract just like normal. 7 minus 5 is 2. My denominator I worked really hard for, so it's still going to be 7ths. And 3 minus 1 is 2.